the Survivor, we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor. It is the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And it is the most Monday a Monday can be today. Both of our, well, two other guests, I should say, are having some issues getting into our system. We are still working on that, but instead of making you wait, I would never do that, even though I did. We are going to get cracking here on the Ellen Greenberg suspicious death. For those who do not know about this case, it was January 26, 2011, outside the suburbs of Philadelphia in a very nice neighborhood called Manayunk. And there is an impending nor'easter. Ellen Greenberg lives in a building with her fiance, Sam Goldberg. She heads home from school as a teacher and makes sure to fill up her car with gasoline, obviously looking ahead to the future after the storm. She also is then making a fruit salad in her kitchen. And that night, somehow, some way, Ellen Greenberg winds up dead. Sam Goldberg, the fiance, he calls his cousin, who reaches out to his uncle, a powerful criminal defense attorney in the Philadelphia area, and does that before calling 911. And eventually he does call 911, and there's a long-winded story from Sam Goldberg on 911, where about 2 minutes into the call, he says, "Oh my God, there's a knife in her chest." She was apparently laying on her back. A little hard to miss, a large knife sticking out of someone's chest. Lo and behold, she had 20 stab wounds, 10 to the front of her body, 10 to the very back of her head, very back of her neck, and we'll get into some of that. So, long story short, as I'm sure many of you know by this point, but I just want to clarify for those who are new, 14 years have passed. Initially, the medical examiner, a guy named Dr. Marlon Osborne, who ironically or not so ironically ended up down here in Florida and handling the Parkland school shooting case. He initially ruled this. He was the ME on the case. He initially rules it a homicide. He says this is a homicide. And then there's some sort of meeting and an undetermined classification. And this meeting involves allegedly prosecutors, closed door, members of the Philadelphia Police Department, Philadelphia city officials, the list goes on. And after this closed door meeting, a short time later, the manner of death here is switched to a self-unaliving without any real explanation. Fast forward to a week ago Saturday, and on the eve of a lawsuit against 3 defendants who are all city of Philadelphia plaintiffs, three defendants who are all city of Philadelphia employees, not plaintiffs. The plaintiffs were Josh and Sandy. Dr. Marlon Osborne decides to, reach out through an attorney and send what's known as a verification letter. And he says, you know what? I made a mistake in so many words. He didn't put it quite like that. It is anything but a self-unaliving. He puts that in writing, in legalese. I was up in Philly. The trial was supposed to kick off. And sure enough, there is never a trial. There's a settlement on Monday morning, an undisclosed amount of money being paid to the Greenbergs, which is not what they're interested in. But much more importantly, now a re-examination of the case promised by the city of Philadelphia. My first question to you, Joe Patuto, and I don't want to beat up on Philadelphia too bad, which isn't really true because they deserve it. How do we trust them as we hopefully We're waiting, by the way, for Guy DeAndrea, the homicide prosecutor at the time, a homicide prosecutor in the office. It's one of the few people that's actually seen Ellen's case file. He's supposed to come on, as is Tom Brennan, who is the family's private investigator. They're, again, having some technical issues getting in. So Steve Cohen is working behind the scenes, and that's why I said it is the most Monday ever. But by the way, Donna Adelson's in court tomorrow. We'll be covering that live at 2:30. But Joe Patuto, everyone knows the professor emerita at the University of Nebraska School of Law. She is a very bright legal mind. So now the city of Philadelphia, as part of this settlement, Joe, says, you know what? We are going to reopen this, re-examine it. Now, if I'm Ellen Greenberg's parents, I am not putting too much stock in that. Are you?
Well, they did settle, and that leads me to believe that they thought they got some level of assurance that they could trust that there would be a fair re-examination of the information. And that I believe, although I don't know for sure, that many of the officials that would have been, including the police and people in the ME's office, who would have been involved in the initial changing of the cause of death and sticking to it, are no longer there. So we'll have independent, it'll still be Philadelphia, I assume, but it'll be independent people. And probably the biggest, I think, protection here is that there's a lot of public attention now being put on the case, including Philadelphia newspapers, as well as you, Joel, and others. So I think in the face of what is really very clear evidence, the change in the assistant ME's statement as to cause of death, and the fact that there's going to be so much attention paid to this, I think it's probably highly likely that they will do a fair examination this time around. Otherwise, this will blow up again, and there'll be a continuation of what's gone on for the last 14 years.
Yeah, and I can tell you there really hasn't been any media attention, very limited here and there. CNN did a fantastic piece. Shout out to a guy named Thomas Lake, who I'd like to get on the show. And he did a follow-up story. And now you're seeing it in People Magazine. Now you're seeing it in the Daily Mail. A lot of, more of the traditional stuffy, publications, AKA the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Journal.
And they were there on Monday, weren't they? Some of them. Wasn't there a fair amount of coverage on Monday?
So there was, what was interesting, there have not been any kind of Dateline 2020s done on this story. And part of the reason, sadly, is that there is really no ending to this story. And there's also a still very confusing middle to third quarter of this story. And I hate to say it, but in broadcast news, they want to give you the full story. It's rare you'll see a Dateline without some sort of conclusion to the story, whether it's a trial or something else. And we're not there yet. But now I was happy to see that both 2020 and Dateline had a presence there. I really was hoping Tom Brennan would be here. And if not today, we'll get him back. And if not Guy DeAndrea, we'll get him back too. Because Tom Brennan has some very choice words for the people. For those who don't know, he's probably in his early 80s, completely with it, completely energized. He's been leading this investigation for the Greenbergs basically this whole time, pro bono, and he's a retired Pennsylvania state trooper. He also happened to start the cold case unit at the state police. So he is hoping that this gets into their hands, which we'll get to the criminal side of this potentially in a minute. But Dr. Joe Patuto, to you, I feel like every time I cover a case, there's 37 new things that I learn, which is part of being a law student, even though I'm technically not one. One of them is this verification notice letter. How common are these? This thing that Dr. Marlon Osborne put in writing and signed, was that done through his attorney? Is that just sent by him and then admitted into evidence in the court? What are these verification letters?
Well, it's sworn. It's essentially an affidavit. I would assume he consulted with a lawyer before he executed that document. I think he would have been extraordinarily well advised to talk to a lawyer before doing it. Uh, and he did it, under oath so that it has the force of law behind it now. So were he to get on the stand and recant, he would be subject to a perjury charge because one of the two statements would look like they were false and intentionally so. So that's the effect of doing it as an affidavit. It's a sworn statement. It's not simply, you sending a letter and saying, here's what I think. And I remember the other day that there was a guess that the reason why he had executed this is that Philadelphia was not going to stand his expenses if the lawsuit went forward, and the plaintiffs, that is the Greenbergs, prevailed, and that might have been what the impetus was to come on record now. So he's now effectively, if this has to be litigated again before there's a change in the cause of death, he's effectively a plaintiff's witness. In other words, a witness for the Greenbergs.
Okay, I'm communicating here with Steve, hoping again to get Tom Brennan. They're working on. Tom, like me, is a little tech challenge, but we'll see if we can make it happen. Fairy Glam Psychologist here. The wide reach, this is an interesting question, Joe, while we're on the subject of the internet has revolutionized true crime by shedding light on these cases. Scary to think how many suspicious deaths may have been covered up through corruption. I mean, I always say, kind of half jokingly, that social media kills. I think it's just very bad for a number of reasons, but it does have its benefits. If any of the benefits, if there are any benefits, it's that it is very hard to escape a camera on someone's cell phone these days who's able to say, hey, look at my Twitter or my Instagram. It's also, it's democratized news gathering. So anyone who's got information related to this case has been able to put it up on social media. What do you think this is doing to the landscape of cases like Ellen's case, where it appears that it's more of a movement, like a grassroots movement by the people, led by the parents, as opposed to traditionally when it was media, it was all the news that was fit to print in the New York Times, and you'd read all that news and then either hop on the bandwagon or not. But now it's more democratized. Do you think that has changed the landscape?
Yeah, I do. The filter is gone. And the filter, both had benefits and negatives to it. I mean, the filter meant that things did not get widely circulated unless they'd been vetted. So you didn't get, rumor or conspiracy theories out there and people, running off half-cocked when the information was inaccurate. And that's clearly a very valuable function that the mainstream media perform. On the other hand, there were cases that the mainstream media would not have had time or interest in following through with. And the fact that there are so many other people looking means that it's less likely that one of those cases can go buried and not resolved in the right way. So it's got negatives and benefits. I think on balance, it is a positive, not a negative. Although you couldn't say it's an unalloyed positive because it does come with, costs associated with it. But there are cases like this. Now, I would say to the person in the chat, the name's now gone, who had said a lot of cases like this, that I'm not sure about. I think most public servants and most people who do their jobs try to do them right, try to do them fairly. It's Joe, you've had a lot of guests on who are, from law enforcement, extremely ethical, hardworking, are willing to point out when they think an investigation went wrong. And Tom Brennan is certainly an example of that. But, there's no system that works perfectly. There is no group in the world that doesn't have what I call jerks in it. I have a 20% jerk rule, which is every group that exists, 20% of them are jerks. And anybody who says my group doesn't have jerks, you better pay close attention to, because
But
he's suspect.
I've got a glimmer of hope here. I see Tom
good.
Brennan almost in. I see like a gray screen. I'm waiting for Tom hopefully to pop up. Tom, if you can hear me, I think you've entered the studio. You just have to hit your camera icon so we can see that handsome
You have to
face. But
scroll down.
you have to scroll down. But let me say this about Tom. Besides just being a great guy, he is put in so much effort. I mean, the Greenbergs have spent about $800,000 of their own money in this settlement. While it is undisclosed, they're hoping to recoup. Let me see something here. Once.
Look.
Hey,
Yeah.
Tom, we're not seeing you. Can you hear us, Tom? There
Here
he
he
is.
is.
Oh, and now no audio, but we're gonna get there, Tom. We're gonna get there. I'm not hearing you, but I see you. Where is the COE here? This is gonna be crazy. This is where the COE is much needed. Tom, I'm going to bounce you out for a second, and I'm gonna let the COE call you and stay right where you're at. Stay right where you're at.
There's a mute button that maybe he didn't hit. It may
Yeah,
have been on mute.
I'm not seeing that.
Okay.
I mean, it looks like he's hit it.
Okay.
Hang on 1 second, everyone.
I will say while you're doing that, Jill,
Yeah.
the announcement of the settlement it wasn't the whole amount, but was close. Remember that even if it's penny off, that statement is accurate. So it could be almost up to the entire amount, but not there completely. So it doesn't have to be 50,000 off or 20,000 off or whatever. It can be 1 penny off, and the statement would be accurate that they didn't get everything. So we
That
don't
is,
know how much it was. I hope they got 1 penny less
yeah.
than the full amount.
Imagine if they shorted him 1 penny just to be Philadelphia. It would drive me crazy. So there's also there is a second lawsuit which I don't think is going forward now.
Yeah,
And that had to do with the Supreme Court. If you can explain
right.
that, and I'm just going to try to
Yeah.
hang on 1 sec. Hang on 1 sec, Joe.
Okay.
Tom. Oh, you're still muted. Ileana's going to call you. I'm going to bounce you back out. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. Yeah. What the Greenbergs, the parents, tried to do as the executors of Ellen's estate and in their own right as the parents was to get an order from the courts forcing the medical examiner to change the cause of death on the death certificate from murder to at least undisclosed. And they were at the appellate court in Pennsylvania, and the appellate court said, I have no authority to do this under state law. But the appellate court wrote a pretty scathing opinion saying this case is a travesty. This should be done. I just can't, as a judge, order the executive. And the background here is, let me see if I can, because it can be pretty complicated. We have a separation of powers government, both at the state level, at the federal level. And if I'm a judge, I can't exercise the powers of the executive. So that if the executive has the authority to do a death certificate, and of course it does, they have the discretion to make the decision about what the cause of death is. I, as the judge, cannot reach in and say, here's the theory, and say to the medical examiner, you must change it, because that job is in the discretion of the medical examiner. So that's what's going on. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania took the case on a very, very narrow ground. And that was in circumstances like this, where the evidence, where there was substantial or maybe overwhelming evidence, and there was evidence of coercion or at least undue influence because of the meeting that you mentioned, Joel, where the prosecutor and the chief ME and other officials where they are talking to the assistant ME. In that very narrow ground, should there be authority in the executors of the estate to order a reexamination? That was the question that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court was going to hear. That seems to have been mooted by the agreement of Philadelphia in the trial that didn't go on last Monday. The agreement of Philadelphia to take another look at the case.
And I'm hoping, and I asked again. I was up in Philadelphia for all this, and that's where I was. I finally met Tom in person. Was talking to Joe Pedraza. It's the first time I met Josh and Sandy in person. By the way, interestingly, just to show you how high stress this is, Tom, I think I can say this, wasn't feeling well right afterwards. Kind of came down with the flu, and lo and behold, so have Josh and Sandy, because it's a super high stress situation. Took a lot out of them, and I could see how much it was taken out of Josh in particular. So it's tough.
Yeah, and it
Yeah,
is
go
tough.
ahead.
And I think it's got the ironic when you're pushing for something and fighting for something for so many years, even if it looks as though you've won or at least you've had a victory, I think it's pretty draining because it at least has the possibility of you may not have to be fighting for that much longer. And when you've exerted so much effort, so much time, so much mental energy and money, and I'm sure has made it very difficult for them most of the time to just lead a normal day to day. It's consuming. To have it happen and look like, gee, you may be released, has the irony of, making you feel down or even depressed about it, even though you've won.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that's where they ended up on Monday.
Well, it's so interesting you say that, because in speaking to Josh Greenberg in the hallway, he looked like the air was let out of a balloon, and he said the analogy he made was, which I found this to be really interesting. Actually, he said, "Have you ever studied, for hours?" And he's a retired periodontist, so he studied for a lot of exams. But he said, "Have you ever studied and studied and studied, and then you take the exam and it's over?" And he was sort of suggesting that he was feeling a letdown because there
Yeah,
is this adrenaline, this need to get answers, and they did. And now, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's so far to go in this that I know
right.
he's going to get re-energized, and the adrenaline will come back, and he wants to see it through. And in no way am I suggesting he's even close to the end of the line in terms of his lifetime. He's got many years ahead of him, but he looked drained, and he looks like he needed to get some rest and just kind of collect himself, which is hope. And by the way, we asked him to come on. If for some reason we cannot get to, I'm going to check it with Tom one more second. Tom, yeah, I'm gonna. Tom, you can hear me? He can't even hear me right now. So we're dealing. This is kind of like watching Carm try to get onto what she calls barnyard, but it's actually called StreamYard. So, you guys all see that without the COE, basically help this. Hang on one sec. Um, COE is telling me to allow him in, which I've done, but there is no audio, and I apologize. Again, Mondays will always be Mondays, and this is especially
You
uh, uh,
know, things
snitch.
go wrong. We don't live, Adam and Eve ate an apple in paradise. Things just go wrong.
Yeah. By the way,
Nothing's perfect.
I'm drinking a little protein drink for someone who's asking in the chat. So Joe, let's go back to this. So I also and we're going to play this Josh Shapiro sound, and we're also going to play the sound that Brian Enton got with News Nation of Dr. Wayne Ross, who was the pathologist, talking about how this was a staged crime scene. So, um,
And
you
he's a
know,
pathologist that the Greenbergs hired. Is that right?
correct, and
Okay.
he believes it was a stage scene. And what's interesting in that particular instance is that he believes, and Josh has said this publicly, that he does not think Ellen was stabbed to death. He believes that she was strangled, and he has reasons as to why. Let me see here. I'm going to bring Tom back in, and he's still on with. I'm going to leave him up there until we maybe hear some audio. No truer statement than this. No jerks at STS. Let's keep it that way. It's not Gatorade. It's a
Somebody's
shake.
fighting me on my 20% rule. I stand by it.
Mm. Um, Do I know Don Lemon? All I know is that he's completely irrelevant now. But I know we run in some of the same circles, and he used to work at Fox 5, and being a nice guy and enabling, or what I really think is going on with Josh Shapiro. And Joe, please weigh in on this. I think he's turning a blind eye, and through that has almost become complicit in this case. The
Yeah,
COE, I'm going to mute you for a sec. You go ahead, Joe. I got it.
Yeah, I think as I understand it, there was a snowstorm the day that this happened. And I think what may have occurred, because I really don't think police go out of their, regularly, routinely, or even, occasionally try to cover up a murder. I mean, they go in with a bad intent. But I think what may have happened here is they went in, the fiance said she was suicidal. They take a cursory look. They don't touch the body, and they're not supposed to be touching the body. That should be the ME and the crime scene people. So they don't know that there's stab wounds under her. And they decide, well, yeah, that's what it is. It's an unaliving. And they leave without doing their job. That is, without taking crime scene photos, without securing the premises, without doing all the things they should have done had it been a potential murder. Then the ME, within a couple of days, comes back and says this is a homicide. And now they're stuck. They're really stuck because they either have to admit they didn't do it right in the first instance, and now it's going to be an uphill battle because there's been evidence that's lost that they're never going to be able to recoup. And in the meantime, they allowed Sam Goldberg, Ellen's fiance, to go in with a cleaning crew to clean up everything. So there's evidence that wasn't done at the time that they're never going to be able to now get. And so, I think maybe at that point they might have said, we really stuck now. We can't get the evidence. And if we admit we didn't do it right, we're all going to look like we're negligent. So let's now proceed to cover it up. And that's what I think happened. Not to say that wasn't terrible and bad. It was unprofessional, certainly unethical, yes. But I don't think they started out to do it. They just found themselves in the bind. And then I think the Attorney General, there's been, as I understand it, he has a relationship with at least friends of the Goldberg family, if not the family itself. They do supposedly a reexamination a few years later, and it's, as I understand it, and Joel, you may know this better than I, it may have been the same people who were in Philadelphia at the time who did the first evaluation, and they come back and say it's not a murder, and he accepts it. Now, whether he pushed that way or simply accepted the result without questioning at all, either
Can you
way,
hear me
he
now?
should have done more. There you go.
There you, Tom, you're here, man. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Took a little while. For those who do not know, Tom, look at this comment from Nadine Malloy that Tom is retired Pennsylvania State Police, and he is the current and longtime private investigator pro bono for the Greenbergs. Again, the Greenbergs have spent about $800,000. Yes, sir.
Joel, can we get this? I haven't done this before with anyone. Okay.
Yeah.
But I am a criminal investigative analyst. Okay. TV calls us profilers. Okay.
Yeah.
I was a profiler with the FBI Behavioral Science Unit.
I didn't know that. Okay. But
yes, and we always flew coach. We didn't have our own plane.
But now hold on. But you were part of the Pennsylvania State Police, correct?
Yes. I was with the Pennsylvania State Police, retired, and I went with the FBI Behavioral Science Unit.
Well, Tom, I didn't know that, but now, because we use profilers all the time, now you're gonna have to come on a million other cases. But Tom, look at this. I don't know if you can see this comment, because I played this for everyone last week. Tom, is Tom the guy who suggested Josh Shapiro can kiss his ass? Yes, that was Tom Brennan.
Yes. Yes.
So, Tom, you're being joined right now by Dr. Joe Patuto. She's a professor emerita and a good friend of ours. Does a lot of cases with us. She is a longtime professor at the University of Nebraska Law. And Guy was going to hop on. So this has been a Monday. I don't know what's happening, but no offense at all to Joe, and I don't think she'll take any. Tom Brennan is sort of the star of this show. And Tom, I don't want you to hold the phone. You can place it down because it's going to make your arms tired to hold that. But yeah, you can just prop it at some angle there that would work for you.
How's that?
Perfect. As long as at this point, anything is good.
Okay.
But Tom, so I saw you. I met you just as classy in person, I thought, as talking to you beforehand. Now we've met officially. I know you and Gavin Fish grabbed some cheesesteaks, but now that you had like a week to digest this, tell me your reaction to what we witnessed there on Monday morning in light of Dr. Marlon Osborne's 180.
Well, when we worked on Dr. Osborne's verification from Friday over the weekend, and then he finally signed it. But in signing it, what people don't realize, he admitted that the information that he received from the police 4 days after Ellen's death, he admitted that he now knows that information was false. Okay?
Yeah. Tom, do you,
and
let me stop
because
you there.
he knows it was false.
Yeah, and Tom, do you buy that it took this long, or is he just backtracking at this point?
I honestly believe that that in fact, and possibly with a little pangs of conscience, and the fact that we were going to go to trial, and he had his own counsel, all right? He didn't have counsel appointed by the city. He had his own attorney. So I think rather than risk going to trial and paying large sums of money because of all the evidence that we had, he decided to roll over. Okay?
Joe wants to jump in there, the professor.
I do. I have a question for you, Tom. I think that in my view, and you know this case much better than I do, so it's, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. But I thought he also claimed that, who was she? Adams, the neuropathologist, had made a report, and that he relied on that report, and she then said never did it, never talked to him, never submitted any invoices. Was that evidence that the police gave him? He was relying on something else, and he wasn't making any independent claim about it?
In his deposition, doctor, what he said was, in his deposition, is that he carried that in a jar from his office over to CHIP, the Children's Hospital, and that Dr. Rourke did a walk by and looked at it and said, what she said, okay? That was one of the first things I looked at when I read the autopsy report initially. And I contacted Dr. Rourke, and Dr. Rourke said, well, she was going in for a back operation, and she said, we can get together when I come back and after rehab. I said, okay. So when she got back and I gave her some time to rehab, I called her again. And she said, Tom, I've been seeing a lot about this in the paper. And she said, there isn't any sense in you and I getting together because I don't recall the case. I never did anything with the case. If I would have done anything with the case, I would have submitted a report along with an invoice for my work. Okay. So I checked with the medical examiner's office. There's invoices for Dr. Rourke prior to Ellen's death and after Ellen's death. There's nothing about Ellen. Okay. One of the first things that Guy DeAndrea looked for in the police reports when he was reviewing the file was that report from Dr. Rourke. Guy DeAndrea didn't find that report. He contacted the police. The police said they didn't have it. He contacted the medical examiner's office, and the medical examiner's office told him the report didn't exist. Okay? Now, Dr. Rourke has the reputation that if you asked her the time of day, okay, you would get a report and an invoice. All right? So I'm going with what Dr. Rourke says. She doesn't recall it. She never had anything to do with it. And if she did, she would have submitted a report and an invoice.
But are you
So that
absolving Dr.
paragraph,
Osborne? Are you absolving Dr. Osborne nonetheless from?
that paragraph in the autopsy report is fraudulent. I would like to know who submitted that into the report. Even Dr. Rourke's name is misspelled in that paragraph.
That's interesting. Very interesting.
Okay.
So shout out to
know,
Annalie Finch here for the super chat. Go ahead, Tom.
So there's, in a criminal investigation, okay, with a criminal investigation, and that's where we should be right now. We should be starting a someone should be starting a criminal investigation. Okay. And if in fact you can prove that the people in the DA's office and the police, along with members of the medical examiner's office, conspired to cover up a homicide, that's a criminal offense. Okay? So those people can be arrested. So that may be part of this criminal investigation.
Yeah. And by the way, I want to get to that, Tom. But first, and I'm going to play you Shapiro's sound as much as I know you're going to be annoyed by that, but I want to play it for you. But before we get there, you talked about, because you're part of the team, you're part of the Greenbergs team here. And I asked you about this verification letter. Can you kind of pull back the curtain and sort of walk us through the process of how this went down for you guys to obtain that letter?
Okay. The judge in this case, okay, one of the judges in this case, when she was reading over this and talking with the attorneys, she said to the attorneys, well, have you guys done any talking about settling this without going to court? And they said no, no one had. So with that, Joe and Will said, hey, Osborne has his own attorney, and his own attorney is not with the city. Why don't we talk to him? So that's how it started. They started talking to him, and that's what they came up with. Osborne wanted to get out of the suit, and that's what they came up with the verification. All right?
Yeah. Hey, Tom, we can't see your handsome face with your hand in the way, but otherwise you're good.
Okay.
Yeah. And that verification basically, I mean, Tom, in your 14 years, or I don't know, how many years have you actually been investigating it?
12 years. It's 14 years,
wow.
But I didn't get in. I got involved with it 2 years after Ellen's death.
Okay. By the way, shout out to Space Coast on the West Coast for gifting membership. So to you, and by the way, this Friday I'm wearing my Space Coast T-shirt, and it's available in the merch store. But and by the way, if you like the content, please hit like, please subscribe, and we got a Patreon page. And by the way, some of the stuff we're putting into Patreon, Carm, my beloved mother, I call her today. I'm like, "What are you up to?" She's like, "Oh, I'm watching myself." Nothing Carm enjoys more than watching herself, and she was interviewed about being a survivor with some museum, some Holocaust museum. Some I should know the details, but long story short, we're going to put that in Patreon, so you get to see different sorts of things.
Yes,
Besides,
Ellen's grandmother is
yeah.
a Holocaust survivor.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's amazing. So Tom,
Yes.
I'm gonna play this. I know you're gonna have things to say. If you want to jump in, this is now Josh Shapiro being confronted by News Nation reporter who's a friend of ours, for full disclosure, Brian
Yes.
Enton. Here's his, what I call on the thumbnail today, Shapiro's sorry statement, meaning pathetic, not sorry. But Tom, if you want to jump in at any point, you just raise your hand or speak and I'll pause it. But this is Josh Shapiro responding to something that Tom's been investigating, as you heard, for the last 12 or 14 years. Here we go.
You like to see happen? Do you think there should be a new criminal investigation?
Well, look, I don't think I should speak for the city of Philadelphia and why they chose to make the decision they did. But let me just offer maybe some broader comments. First off, as a father of four, my heart breaks for the Greenberg family. No parent should ever have to bury a child. And this is a case that I inherited as Attorney General that occurred, if memory serves me, about 6 years prior to me even becoming Attorney General of the Commonwealth. And it was a case that was put on my desk after the city of Philadelphia ruled that Ellen Greenberg died by suicide, not by homicide. That wasn't my decision. That was made years prior by the city of Philadelphia. The case was then sent to the Attorney General's office for investigation. And we looked at every possible angle. There's nothing I wanted more.
Tom, please
That
jump
is
in.
a
I
lie.
paused it. Yeah. Gavin made a list of the lies. There's many. Explain that, please, Tom.
The reason for that is, okay, I'm tired of hearing the exhaustive investigation they did. Did they ever interview the property manager? No. Did they ever interview Phil Hanton, who was the individual in the lobby, the security man in the lobby of the lofts? 2 individuals, agents, showed up at his house, showed him his statement that he made originally to the police. They said, "Is this what you said?" He said, "Yes." And that's all he gave. That's all they wanted. They gave him their card and he left, and they left. That was it. Okay? They didn't do a damn thing as far as their exhaustive investigation went. Okay? I want to see a copy of their investigative file. That's what I want to see. Because according to somebody I know, there isn't any copies of it at all on their report system. So where is it? Okay?
Now, Tom, fill in the blank here for me. So, Guy, who was supposed to join, and we're going to get Guy, and I'm going to try to, bring you, Guy, and Josh and Sandy, or even someone like Gavin or John Lucy from Penn Live, print reporters, back to discuss all this. But correct me if I'm wrong. Guy DeAndrea, who was at the time in the Philadelphia homicide, in the prosecutor's office for homicides, he saw some version of a case file, correct?
Yes. He found it in a closet covered up with some Christmas decorations. It didn't even have a file number on it.
And this is what you are asking to see? This what Guy looked at? Is that what you want to see?
I wanted to see that file along with the Attorney General's exhaustive investigation file. Okay. I want to see who all they spoke with. Okay. Who all they went out and talked to, where they beat the brush. Okay. To find what they wanted to find. That's what I want to see.
Yeah. Joe, please feel free to hop in with any questions at any time. But I'm going to kind of, focus in here on Tom a little bit. I'm going to keep playing the sound in a moment. But Tom, this is another thing that comes up over and over from and on. Tom, do you know the names of those who were in the meeting right after Ellen's passing, where the manner was changed? Who was involved in this decision? What do we know about that meeting? Like, when did it occur? And do we have any specifics? I know it was a closed door meeting, so we don't have a lot, but what were you able to kind of put together from that?
We could identify some of the individuals that took place in the meeting. Okay. The meeting was held if I can't recall exact, 4 or 5 days after Ellen's death. Okay. There were no notes made, okay, of the meeting. There were no notes by the medical examiner's office, no notes by the DA's office, no notes by the police. Okay. All we know is what Dr. Osborne said the district attorney's office and the police told him. Okay. And they told him, like, she was in the apartment by herself, that the boyfriend was accompanied by the security man down in the lobby when he broke down the door and all this other stuff. And all of those things are lies.
Yeah.
We proved that they were lies.
Yeah. I mean, Tom, I got to say, when I watched this, because there's a comment here, how can Shapiro gaslight us? I was truly, Gavin and I texted each other, fish, and we're like, number one, this guy's full of lies. Number two, there's such a condescension from here where he's, kind of putting the onus also on the Greenbergs, saying, it's okay for them to get people to lash out at me. There's nothing worse than burying a child. Let's keep watching here, because I know you've got choice words for him. But again, if there's any specific point you want me to stop it, you just yell out and I'll stop it.
Then to give these parents some finality, some answers, some clarity. And we received more evidence, more information during the course of our investigation that sadly didn't show what they wanted it to show, but actually rather pointed to more data, more information that pointed toward a suicide.
Excuse me, that is so much bullshit. That is so much bullshit. Okay. When you point out, okay, that an individual, a medical doctor who is court certified as a stab wound or cutting expert, okay, who's willing to testify that 2 knives were used, a smooth bladed knife and a serrated knife, okay, after examining the autopsy report and the photographs. All right. Also, you have one of their own experts in neurology and pathology stating that the 2 of the wounds were post-mortem, after death, after she was dead. Okay?
Tom, I've seen conflict. I've seen one wound and 2 wounds.
Now this guy who was Attorney General, he's standing there saying that is not real evidence. Okay? He doesn't even, this guy, okay, attorney who was a township supervisor, doesn't even know the definition of real evidence.
Let me interject here, if I may.
Yep, please, Joe.
This reminds me of every good defense lawyer telling a client, don't talk to the police. This press conference is going to come back to haunt him. And anybody, if he decides to run again for governor or try for higher office, anybody doing PR for one of the opponents could take this and then Tom interject what the evidence really was and run this ad. And however much, Joel, this ad drives you nuts, you should be, I think, consoled that it might be the big nail in a politician's,
Yeah.
goals to go on to office.
Joel,
It's so easy.
Joel,
Yeah, Tom.
I spoke with his rabbi in Harrisburg, okay? And his rabbi tried to convince him that this was a homicide.
Wow.
He paid no attention to him. I mean, this guy puts his political career ahead of his own religion. Now, how low is that?
Quite low. And it doesn't surprise me. Was this the same rabbi? Because I know that the Greenbergs and Shapiros in Western PA, outside the Shapiro's home, they go to the same synagogue. Is it that rabbi or the rabbi in Philadelphia?
No, it's the rabbi in Harrisburg.
In Harrisburg. Okay.
Yes.
And he wouldn't, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom. By the way, before I take another breath on this, once again, people are starting to gain some traction here, but the only way to continue to help the Greenbergs is to share this. And I'm not saying that, again, for the millionth time from me, but whether it's my content, Gavin's content, Penn Live with John Lucy, whoever it is, Stephanie Farr, the Inquirer, just please continue to share, retweet, take this link, put it on social media, say, hey, have you heard about this case? This is Governor Shapiro doing X, Y, and Z. It's up to you guys. You guys are the voice of the people. Tom, there's a comment here from Starlet Satori. Why did Shapiro take all the assistant DAs from the Philadelphia Homicide Division and employed them in his Office of Attorney General, but didn't do anything to investigate for 4 years? I'm not sure that he did anything, period, but a response to that question from our chat.
You know, I had one meeting with Michelle Henry, who was his chief of staff in the Attorney General's office, and Jennifer Selber, okay? Now, Jennifer Selber was Guy DeAndrea's supervisor in the DA's office. Guy DeAndrea had to go to Jennifer Selber to get permission to look at the case, okay? Now she's in the Attorney General's office, and she's sitting there while I'm asking some questions regarding what they're doing, okay? And she's saying, you know, how this in fact is a suicide, and that they had another forensic analysis done on Ellen's computer by the FBI, and I questioned them regarding this forensic analysis, and she nor Michelle Henry, they didn't even know what an actual forensic analysis was. They didn't know that the individual, okay, when they do a forensic analysis, they clone the hard drive and they work off the clone, not the original hard drive, okay? They didn't even know that because they asked me, they said, well, you have the computers, where are they now? Okay, so I told them where they were and where I had them. And then when this was closing, Michelle Henry gave me her business card, and Selber gave me hers, and I pushed her card back. I took Henry's, and I pushed her card back, and she said, I'm not trying to protect the Philadelphia Police Department. And I said, imagine that coming from you.
Yeah. Steve Cohen, by the way, I know you're listening. Let's reach out to the rabbi in Harrisburg. That sounds like a very interesting guest to me. And we should also obviously put a call into Jennifer Selber, Phil Hampton, and maybe, who knows, Tom can help us with some of those. Most of them are going to
I can give you the name of another individual, okay, who was in the DA's office and was then an attorney that went to the Attorney General's office, okay, in charge of charge of prosecutions, okay, and when she learned that that the state police in Philadelphia were interested in the case, she called the Philadelphia Law Department and told them not to give the state police any reports. And I have copies of the emails from her where she said she didn't call the homicide people, she called the law department. Okay.
Yeah. So Tom, let me just backtrack. I have so many questions. This is going to go on for a little bit if Tom is willing to, and Joe's here as sort of my referee of common sense. I hope, but Tom, I think one of the things that I have a hard time with, but I don't think other people, is to think that a guy who's got, who's supposed to have a moral compass as a leader of a state, former state attorney general, former supervisor, whatever he is, could never really engage. Maybe I'm just completely naive. I'm playing kind of devil's advocate here. My question to you is, how complicit or not complicit do you believe that Josh Shapiro may have been in this? Was it more an issue of just turning a blind eye to justice, or is there even more there?
I honestly feel, okay, that his stance on this case as Attorney General, the reason why it went the way it did in his office is because he was interested at maintaining the vote of the police department and the city of Philadelphia in his run for governor. That's why he ruled the way he did. Okay?
Yeah, this, by the way, is true, too, from Bree. Shapiro was never a DA. I don't think he was ever a prosecutor. But, Tom, another question here. Obviously, we know at this point that the first call is made by fiance Sam Goldberg, where I believe to Kamian Schwartzman, who then calls his father. And for those who don't know, James Schwartzman is still a powerful criminal defense attorney in Philadelphia. I believe his daughter actually went to the same high school at the same time as Governor Josh Shapiro. What can you kind of elaborate a little bit on the connection between Sam Goldberg's uncle and Josh Shapiro himself? What kind of relationship was this?
Okay, well, Jimmy Schwartzman's daughter and Josh Shapiro went to school together, and they appear on the same fundraising committee for the school. Okay, so they know one another. Evidently, there may have been political contributions made by the Schwartzman family and Schwartzman's daughter to his political campaign. Okay, that's why he sent the case to Chester County. All right? Chester County being another Democratic DA that he knew. Okay?
Yeah.
And that DA was running for judge and needed his support. Okay?
Yeah, I mean, Tom, I don't want to get you in too much trouble here, but I know you're old school and you're just going to kind of shoot from the hip, and I love it. When Shapiro basically recuses himself because of this conflict of interest, do you think that it possibly goes maybe a step or a half step further where, Shapiro lets people know about his relationship with Sam Goldberg's uncle to kind of say, hey, there's a personal relation, we know the family, that kind of thing. Do you think that was you?
In this interview with Brian,
yeah,
okay, does he ever talk about the conflict of interest is the reason why the appearance of a conflict of interest is the reason why he pushed the case down to
he
Chester
blames
County?
it on he blames it on the Greenbergs.
That's it. He blames it on the Greenbergs. He doesn't take responsibility for it. Okay. He doesn't say anything about the conflict of interest, does he?
No. Speaking of that, let's keep playing this out because this statement really bothered me. By the way, Carm weighed on. My mom weighed in as a therapist and said that this, she did not buy a word of what he was saying here. Let's put it that way. Here we go.
The Greenberg family asked that we no longer consider the case. And
right there. Is that true, Tom? The
Greenbergs, he never, ever talked to Sandy or Josh. Ever. Ever.
Yeah,
All
let
right.
me interject here. He didn't quite say that. Did they ask anybody in the office? I mean, that's what he's going to say. It didn't have to
He
be
never-
direct to him.
They never talked to anybody in the office.
Okay.
They never talked to him.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. By the way, someone suggested this in the last show, and if someone can pull the last show and this show and do like a 5 to 7 minute mashup of Josh Shapiro talking with a guy like Tom and Gavin bringing in the counterpoints, I'd love to put that on social. I honestly just don't. I wish I had the time to do it. I don't. If someone out there in internet YouTube land can do it, I will put it on my socials and share it with Gavin, because that's a quick way. You heard Joe say that this could be used in a future political ad against Josh Shapiro. Well, why not start that now?
Right.
I'm just
right.
disgusted in this behavior. Let's keep going here. And again, this is Josh Shapiro responding to Brian Etten. Now, I think Brian did a really good job. And Brian said this on News Nation. It's very hard to do. If I was there and I had my druthers, of course, I would have said, what about your relationship with the uncle, James Schwartz, which he would have not been happy with. But it was a press conference for another event, of course. And they would have cut Brian Etten off. But, I think Brian, given another shot, will ask those follow-ups as any reporter hopefully will.
Well,
But here we go.
That's because he would never answer any of Brian's calls for an interview.
Yep. That's true, too. Here we go. Here's the rest.
To the Commonwealth Attorneys Act, I had the authority as Attorney General to transfer that case to a neighboring district attorney. And I did. We transferred it to the Chester County District Attorney, if memory serves me. They looked at it for a couple of years and they found the same determination as well. There was no evidence there that supported a homicide. There was no evidence there that supported any sort of criminal charges against anyone else. And they closed the case. So over the span of whatever it's been, over 10 years, over a decade, you've had 3 or 4 different law enforcement agencies look at it and come to that same conclusion.
Right there, Tom. Whatever it's been, I think over 10 years, this guy knows every detail for the most part because it involves him, don't you think?
Yes. Yes.
I mean,
he does. And he's just lying.
Yeah. I mean, he's specifically being nebulous, but let me continue here.
The city of Philadelphia were the ones that began this process when they determined the cause of death. That's on them to explain why they determined that. That had nothing to do with the Attorney General's office or any district attorney's office. I'll end this.
Tell us why the laughter there, Tom.
I'm sorry, but it's like they're the bad guys, not me. Okay, which is bullshit.
Yeah.
Okay, he just lies and lies. I emailed him at least a dozen times requesting an hour of his time to sit down and talk to him about this case. I never received an answer.
Did you get a response of any sort?
No, none at all. No responses at all.
Yeah, he's busy. He's on scene, taking credit for a lot of things, but not wanting to deal with this. Let me continue to play it out. Just like another 2 minutes or so of him talking.
Yeah. Where I began, my heart really does break for the Greenberg family. And I know that, some, maybe feel that lashing out at me in the media is helpful to their cause.
That right there makes me want to just rip my hair out. That right there makes me want. I mean, now, and Tom, we can talk about the Sam Goldberg statement, but in that statement, for those who don't know, Sam Goldberg recently sent a written statement, very carefully worded, to CNN. He is Ellen's fiance, and in that, he basically puts it all on Ellen's mental health issues, which we now know this was not a self-unaliving, but then turns the script all on him. How can people accuse him of this? How can people, make his life miserable? And now Shapiro's doing the exact same thing. I just want to take that back for a second. Here we go.
Oh, yeah.
Here we
Oh,
go.
yeah.
Where I began, my heart really does break for the Greenberg family. And I know that, some, maybe feel that lashing out at me in the media is helpful to their cause. I'm not going to stand in judgment of them. These are parents who are grieving and anguished. And again, I think no parent should have to bury a child. Lashing out isn't going to change the evidence here. And I'm hopeful that as this process goes forward, if any new information comes to bear, that it immediately be shared.
Tom, what else do you need other than this is after the medical examiner says it's not an unaliving? What else does he need?
That's it. And to top it off, I spoke with the detective for the Chester County District Attorney's Office. All right. And so I supplied him with the depositions of everybody. Okay. Dr. Galino, Dr. Osborne, Dr. Emery. Okay. All of the depositions, I gave them all to him. And in the deposition of Dr. Emery, where she states that yes, the weapon, the wound that I looked at was postmortem, and did it happen to occur after death? Yes. Okay, that was the answer. And now that district attorney's office is saying that's not evidence. Okay, did they talk to the security guy at the loft? No. Did they talk to the property manager? No. Did they speak with anybody? No. Did they talk to the first individual through the door, the EMT that pronounced Ellen? No. Okay. Come on, guys. Okay. This is police work. This is police work. It's not bullshit. It's not politics. It's police work. These people didn't do anything. Nothing.
They turned a blind eye. Tom, I feel bad because you're holding on to that phone, and but
no, and I'll tell you what, this guy, I'm just so fed up with the lies.
Tom, it's perfect like that. Just leave it. You're good. Just leave it. It's good.
I'm just really fed up with the lies.
There are two different lines here as I hear it. One of them was terrible investigation, almost no investigation. The other is the evidence that runs to showing it couldn't have been a suicide. And the talking points on the latter, it strikes me, depending on where this argument is made in the public media going forward, I think need to be separate from how bad the investigation was. Because it could have been a shoddy investigation and there's no evidence that, that it was a murder. That's not the case here. And when he says no evidence, it seems to me, and you just went through some of it, Tom, the items that were not considered either is it Harrisburg or wherever the other county was, or by the AG that all show it wasn't a suicide as talking points. So whether it's a reporter in a press conference or somebody in a news story, the easier, and Joe, you know this, and I know this from what you would do with the judge, the easier you make it for somebody who has some authority to take it and use it, the more likely that they're going to take it and use it. And so the crisper the talking points, the better. And Tom, I'm sympathetic to you. You're a trained investigator, and to see people who have done a lousy job, it's hard to not keep pointing to it. And I'm not suggesting that it shouldn't be pointed to, but the other evidence that shows that the decision was wrong, they could have done a great investigation and the decision was wrong. is
You know,
really the part that motivates to, you got to open it up and do it again.
do you know the state police in Philadelphia actually put a PowerPoint together and presented it to the Attorney General's investigators on why this was a homicide?
There you go.
Yeah.
And they still said it was a suicide. Can
Okay,
you
we're gonna
imagine
keep
that?
we're
And
gonna
these
keep playing.
and these are troopers that do homicide investigations every day of their life.
Yeah. And by the way, I think I mentioned it. Tom started the cold case unit, which I think is where he's hoping this will go to. But let me keep playing Shapiro. And Tom, are you good for like another 20 minutes? Because I want to ask you some bunch of other stuff. Okay,
Sure.
here we go, everybody. Here's the rest of Shapiro.
With the Chester County District Attorney and allow the DA there to, to conduct an investigation of that new material should anything come forward.
Do you think the medical examiner coming forward now, though, and saying he no longer believes it's a suicide is enough to push this forward? Now, I mean, that's a big change.
Yeah, I think that's a question for the DA in Chester County. It has to have some evidence with it, not just someone feeling different. But certainly if there's some evidence that this medical examiner has uncovered, I'm not familiar with that. I'm no longer the AG. If they have new evidence, new information, they should share that immediately. One of the things that
I mean, he just doubles down on that right there,
Yes,
Tom. Yeah.
Yes, lie upon lie. Okay.
I mean, it's and by the way, he has made it very well known that his goal in life is to become the first Jewish president of the United States. I've said this
Of the United
before.
States.
As a
Oh,
Jewish guy, I would love
he brags
that.
about it. He brags about it.
I would like that. Unfortunately, that position, Shapiro, is reserved for my son. No, I'm not going to put that kind of pressure on. But anyway, let's go here. Who the hell would want that job? Here we go.
What was particularly frustrating to me when I was Attorney General is someone would have a press conference, claim to have new information. We would invite them into the AG's office, and then they actually didn't have anything that was.
Now this is a case.
See,
Go
Tom,
ahead,
that's
Tom.
where he would put, I tried 10 times
could
to go
walk
up and
up-
talk to him.
I could walk up and punch him in the mouth.
Yeah.
Okay.
So listen.
He's that's a flat out lie.
Yeah. I mean,
Flat
it's
out
just,
lie.
and like the
I got
arrogance.
invited to their office for a meeting that was set up with them by a former attorney general. That's how I got in to meet him. And I didn't meet with Shapiro. I met with his staff. Okay.
Yeah.
He is
I
so
gotta,
much bullshit.
yeah. I got to
Excuse
hear
my
this
language,
one. I got to
I'm
hear this
sorry.
part one more time, and then here we go.
Covered. I'm not familiar with that. I'm no longer the AG. If they have new evidence, new information, they should share that immediately. One of the things that was particularly frustrating to me when I was Attorney General is someone would have a press conference, claim to have new information. We would invite them into the AG's office, and then they actually didn't have anything that was.
I mean, Joe Patuto, it doesn't take a psychologist. I mean, this is gaslighting 101. People would come to
my
me and they
God.
wouldn't have the evidence. I mean, it's
Yeah,
humiliating for him. It's also
Exactly.
that he should have stopped it. I mean, if he's going to lie, he should have stopped this statement 3 minutes ago. But now
He should not have given the statement at all, period. I don't think he should have done this. This is not, let us say at best, it is not helpful to him.
And Joe, how could this, if this gets to another wrongful death suit or a criminal investigation, how could these words be used in a court of law potentially?
Well, they're his statements, and if he's a defendant in the case, it's an admission by him that would be relevant to whatever, if it's relevant to an issue. Now, if he's not sued himself, it would be hearsay as to somebody else unless you could show a conspiracy or something else. There are ways that these things get in. But if somebody ever sued him, for him it's an admission. There isn't any problem with it getting in it, since it would be relevant. But
what if there was if President Trump appointed a Republican U.S. attorney in Philadelphia And that U.S. attorney in Philadelphia directed the FBI to conduct an investigation into this because they believed there was some corruption within the Philadelphia Police Department, medical examiner's office, and the DA's office. And it goes all the way up to him.
Tom,
Could
how
you
would we?
imagine
Tom,
that?
how would we even begin to get that ball rolling?
Well, I don't know that that's quite the
I would like to know. I would like to know somebody who has an who can avail themselves to getting us into the White House.
Mhm.
Mm.
What about the U.S. attorney in Pennsylvania?
That's what I said. If
Yeah, but you're
Trump
saying
appoints a
you
U.S.
say,
attorney in Philadelphia,
yeah, I can't give you. This is not legal advice, but if there's a sitting U.S. attorney there, whether Republican or Democrat, that individual should be receptive to a claim of corruption in state or county, local government, state government, whatever. They certainly have taken cases before. The first step is getting enough publicity on it that somebody in a position to do something knows, or going to an official with the information.
I went to the FBI in Philadelphia with this years ago. Okay, and the FBI in Philadelphia pushed me off. Now, I was a former major case analyst for the FBI, and they pushed me off. Okay.
Yeah. Well, listen, Philadelphia shoulder surgeon who is connected in the city of brotherly love. She says, I got you, Tom. But on a serious note, not to say that's not serious. If anyone, and again, this is an apolitical show, but if someone can help Tom, you just heard work his way into a meeting with someone, it could go a long way. But again, Tom, Attorney General Sunday, that's his name, in PA. What do we know about him?
He's a Republican, and he's a former district attorney from York County. Okay. And I've talked to an individual who's trying to arrange a meeting with him.
Okay.
So we're
All right,
we're trying to get in to sit down and speak with him.
Okay, that would be good. At the very least, let's start there. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask, do you know if anything has moved since last Monday on Philadelphia taking another look at the medical examiners, the cause of death on the death certificate?
No, I don't, doctor. I haven't heard anything.
It's Joe. I'm calling you
there-
Tom. You better call me Joe. Otherwise,
well, there's there's a new medical examiner there. A lady from I think she was from Florida. I'm not sure, but she's in the office now. So it would be up to her on who they were going to and what everybody should everybody forgets. Remember the Inquirer article that Stephanie Farr did, the initial one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Remember, the Philadelphia Inquirer, okay, contacted the Montgomery County medical examiner and had him take a look at the case. And in his findings, he said the least he would have gone with was undetermined. The least, okay? And that was the Montgomery County medical examiner.
so can you get on Joe Rogan?
Maybe.
I wish I could.
Well, I would give it a whirl. If you want to get public attention fast.
You know what, Tom? I know
could.
his producer, Tom. I mean, via email. So you and I
I
can
wish I
craft
could.
you and I can
Because,
craft an email.
I'm sorry, but in Philadelphia, when I was interviewed there in the hall, and they mentioned Shapiro, I just, I couldn't help myself with the vulgarity, but I shouldn't have, I'm not like that, okay? But this guy, okay, I'm sorry to say this, I despise him, okay? For what he's done to this what he's done to this family, and what he hasn't done with his office and the power that he had. You know, I'm so offended by it that I just can't see straight.
Yeah. By the way, Tom goes to show you they're good people in the world. Again, pro bono. He had no real skin in this game, and here he is fighting for the Greenbergs. So, for all the bad in the world, you got Tom Brennan's out there. Believe it or not, he's not done talking yet. It's almost over. Here's the rest of Shapiro.
Particularly new, and they use the media to keep the issue alive. I understand why parents would want to keep this alive. I understand why they would want to find answers. I wanted nothing more than to be able to give them the answer.
I mean, just gaslighting, condescending, lying with impunity
that they wanted.
Yeah.
But when you're in the role of being a prosecutor, you have to follow the evidence, and we never saw
and
any
if it
evidence
wasn't for you folks
being a
in the
prosecutor, you
media,
got to follow the evidence. Go ahead, Tom.
if it wasn't for you folks in the media, okay, keeping this case alive, we would have never gotten where we got. Okay, so far we resolved the civil case, and we resolved it because of what you folks did for us on with the general public. Okay, with keeping this case alive.
Yeah, by the way, as much as I hate to admit it, Joe Rogan has a slightly larger platform than STS. Now, the reason I mention that is, we're all fired up here, but we are a very, very small minority. I guarantee you 98% of people in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania never even heard of this case. So they don't care, but that's why we have to let them know about it and do whatever we can. Again, you hear Tom himself, who's connected, but he's having trouble getting into the Pennsylvania AG's office. He would like to get into the White House. I have a friend of mine, Tom, who's a very sort of high-powered lobbyist in D.C. I'm going to reach out to him, and I'm going to see if I can help in any way. But I want to play this too. This is Brian Enton speaking to Dr. Wayne Rourke. If I'm not, what's his last name? I just screwed up his last name.
Dr. Wayne
Ross, not Rourke.
Yeah, he and I have worked a number of cases together.
Yeah, and this is him speaking to Brian Enton. There's 3 clips here. I want to play these quick and get a couple of more little things in and final thoughts from the guests.
You believe that there was strangulation?
Yes.
To medical certainty?
To reasonable degree of medical certainty, she was strangled. Yeah. I would testify in the court of law. I've said it in my reports.
Do you think there's any signs of abuse before the death?
I'm concerned about that, yes. And the reason I'm concerned about that is the bruises to the wrists, obviously strangulation, but there's extensive bruises to the lower legs. What is that about? Where does she get that? She's not a kickboxer. She's not in karate that I know of. She looks like a typical nice girl, very feminine looking. How'd she get those bruises down there?
Tom, your reaction, because on the record, Josh Shapiro himself says he believes this was a strangulation. You heard that correctly, not a self-unaliving. What are your thoughts, Tom?
Josh Greenberg, right?
Yes.
Josh Greenberg. Did I say Shapiro?
Yeah, you did.
Sorry about that. Josh Greenberg.
Dr. Ross and I are personal friends, okay? And when I first got involved in this case, Dr. Galino down in the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office refused to let me speak with Dr. Osborne. So in order to get him to do that, I talked with Dr. Ross, and he and I sat down. We went over the autopsy report, and we went over the crime scene photographs and we went over all of the autopsy photographs, okay? And in going over the autopsy photographs is where we identified the manual strangulation, okay, on the victim. We also identified the bruises in different stages of healing, okay, which indicated to me that she was being abused, all right, and indicated to Dr. Ross that she was being abused. Following that, with Dr. Ross, I learned that there was the spinal cord specimen still existed in the medical examiner's office. So number one, I contacted Dr. Galino again, and I gave him a short report from Dr. Ross. After he read that report, he emailed me back and he said, well, since Dr. Ross and Dr. Osborne are medical professionals, I'll permit a conference call. So with that, we had a conference call and it took place in the office of the Dauphin County coroner, okay? Present for that call was the Dauphin County coroner, Graham Hetrick, Dr. Ross, and myself. Graham Hetrick didn't ask any questions at all. Dr. Ross got on the phone with Dr. Osborne and asked him a number of questions regarding the autopsy report, et cetera. They didn't agree on some things, but it was the call was very congenial. Then I got on and I asked Dr. Osborne several questions regarding the autopsy report. And the last question that I asked Dr. Osborne was, why did you change your decision from homicide to suicide? He said, I changed it at the insistence of the police. I said, did any of those police officers have a degree in pathology? And with that, the phone call ended. Okay? So now I find out that the specimen still exists in the medical examiner's office. Okay? As a result, I contacted them and we got permission to go examine it. With that, I took Dr. Ross, okay, the coroner for Cumberland County, Charles Hall, and there was an intern with Dr. Ross who was studying under Dr. Ross. So we went down to the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's office. One of the pathologists came out and presented us with the sample, and Dr. Ross examined the sample, and he said, "Oh my God, Tom, look at this." He said, "Do you see the size of this wound in the specimen that we were looking at?" I said, "Yeah." I said, I how can they say, there wasn't any injuries to the spinal cord?" He said, "Tom, what you have to understand too, you see how when the knife enters," he said, "that even makes it larger." So, with that, I said, well, okay. So then I learned, okay, when we were doing the depositions, all right, I find out that, Dr. Osborne may have been disciplined. So I found out that there was 3 memos that still existed on Dr. Osborne's discipline. So with that, I got copies of all 3 of those memos. They were written by Dr. Gary Collins, who is now the medical examiner for the state of Delaware. Okay? So I got those 3 memos and I went over to the state of Delaware, met with Dr. Collins, presented Dr. Collins with all 3 memos, and he said he authored all 3. Okay? In one of those memos Dr. Osborne is chastised for missing manual strangulation on a homicide victim. And guess what? He missed it again on this victim.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah, I did not know that. Wow. This is the second clip. You heard Tom say he's friends with Dr. Wayne K. Ross. He was a pathologist hired by the Greenbergs. Here's a second clip here, and then one more quick one, and then we'll get some final thoughts.
We're going to call this a suicide, not a homicide, that somehow she stands up or leans over, stabbing myself. Oh, I get to get blood drops down there. Blood drops, get down there. Oh, not my hand, sorry. I used the left hand. Shouldn't have done that. Just the right. Blood drops. And then she falls to the ground. She's on it and everything else. Boot turns to the side. Oh, excuse me. Let me stab myself again and drop the blood on the side. Does that make any sense?
No.
No, of course not. Right? But that's what you're suggesting. I mean, you're not suggesting it. So there's blood drops there. They're coming straight down to. And there's hair here. I mean, why the heck's there hair in between here? What's that from? Now, what happens is when you get hair like this, sometimes the person is defending themselves and literally the victim actually pulls their hair out. But the other times, the assailant is pulling the hair out. Either way, you got hair here in the middle. Does that make any sense to anybody? Of course not.
Again, Tom, your take on that. Oh, sorry, we got you. Go ahead.
Dr. Ross and I, we discussed all of these things, okay, when he and I were reviewing the autopsy report and the photographs. Okay, so when this victim, when you see the hair, the victim, is, with the pain and the excitement, the victim may pull the hair out, or the assailant who accosts the individual would be pulling the individual's hair. Okay? That wound on the top of the head, okay, that 6.2 centimeter wound to the top of the scalp on the right hand side, to me that indicates fight or flight. Either Ellen was fighting with the assailant or she was trying to get away when that wound was administered.
Yeah. Now, Tom, the narrative is that there were quote unquote no defensive wounds. You say that's inaccurate. Explain.
Yes. If you take a look at Ellen's wrists, okay, both of those wrists were excised during the autopsy. When they're excised, you can see the damage and the hemorrhage underneath, okay? And you can see the bruising on her forearms. So don't tell me there aren't any, and there's cuts, little cuts on her hands. Don't tell me there aren't any defensive wounds, all right? That's bull.
Yeah. Someone wants to know how tall Ellen was, I think, because they're trying to look at this forensically. Do we know?
She was 5'7".
Yeah, so she's fairly tall. Okay, this is the last sound bite here, and then we'll get some final thoughts.
Look at the scene. First thing I noticed when I look at it, and I think synthetically, is, oh my goodness, this scene is staged. How do I know it's staged? Because I see her back up against the cabinets in the kitchen. Her arms are down by her side. The left hand is holding onto a towel. There's no blood on the towel. There's no blood on her hand. There's blood to the back of her left hand. To the right are her glasses. Now, obviously, she's not sitting there stabbing herself and then wiping herself with the towel. Why does she have a towel there? And there's no blood on the base of the left hand. She didn't use her left hand, obviously, to stab herself. And there's a towel in there. Why would she have a towel in her hand if she's going to be stabbing herself? And there's no blood in it. Well, she didn't. Somebody else put it there. It's staged.
There you go. The towel. Tom, your take on the towel.
That's exactly what I think too. Okay, that it's all part of the staging. That this, the problem here is you can take a look at the specimens that we have, and you have the expert from the medical examiner's office who says that this wound is post-mortem. That wound was also examined by Dr. Ross, who agrees that yes, it was post-mortem. I wish that specimens of the other wounds were kept, because I honestly believe that a number of those other wounds would have been post-mortem. And that's all part of the staging to indicate suicide.
Tom, a lot of people are asking, are you on social media? Are you on Twitter or X, any of these?
I'm on Facebook.
Okay. Just under your name, Tom Brennan?
Yes.
Okay, he's on Facebook. You heard it there. So here are photos of some of these bruises. You see one on the wrist there. It's difficult to look at, obviously. And then the photo that's tough to see is Ellen's neck, and you see marks on the neck. Gavin Fish, by the way, counted the number of bruises. There were reported to be 11, but he counted over 50. So, and by the way, she had confided in friends that she wanted to get out of the relationship. Essentially, things sounded like they were going south. Again, if you appreciate the content, please hit the like button, please subscribe, and we're going to put Carm's Holocaust latest interview on Patreon. That is obviously a special platform for those who really want to support the show, and obviously it goes a long way. Julie Frew, on average, 70 women per month are red-rummed by their partner, ex-partner in the U.S. It's got to stop. It's horrific. This week, coming up tomorrow, you've got Donna Adelson back in court. There's been some back and forth, but we believe she is in court. I'll know for sure later tonight, 2:30 p.m. tomorrow. Depending on what comes out of it, we may do a full show. But we also have new information on the Kentucky Sheriff Mickey Steins, accused in the murder that was caught on video of Judge Kevin Mullins. Maddie Soto, there's new developments. It's hard to believe, but two of her former teachers have now also been arrested for sex crimes to a minor, not necessarily to Maddie herself, but just the fact that she was surrounded by predators is horrific. Stephon Stearns has a court date this week. They're asking for it to be continued, so we have to see if he does wind up in court. And then I've got some new information on the Alexander brothers. I don't know what's wrong with people. These are 3 of 4 brothers in one family, with now over 60 women who've come forward saying that they were brutally SA'd and R'd over a period of about 20 years. These were the quote-unquote real estate moguls. I'm also getting information about them, but they're not exactly what they were portrayed to be. You'll have to follow that up on a future show. Joe Patuto, your final word. What do you think happens here? Now, we've got the original ME saying it was not a self-unaliving. You've got the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office saying that they're going to do a thorough, expedited, full review, which I'm a little skeptical about. But where do you see this turning next, Dr. Joe?
Yeah, I said a few minutes ago that I think there were at least 2 lines here, and the more I think about it, the more I think there are at least 3. One was the really shoddy investigation that was done by the police at the scene, and I think from what I hear, Tom, that you say, and some of what I read in the complaint, at least an inadequate analysis by the assistant medical examiner at the time. Then there's another bucket or line, which is the cover-up or the undue influence that was exerted by the police, it seems, by the police on the medical examiner. And then the third, which is really the legal one. The other 2 are important, and they may lead to, if the evidence supports, they could lead to lawsuits, they could lead to, maybe personnel actions. But the important one on the legal side is getting the investigation of what actually happened moving forward. And that one relies really on the evidence that shows it was not a self-unaliving. And I think the faster that the Philadelphia ME's office comes back, with a report, the better. I assume that the Greenbergs lawyers are going to be in contact with somebody in the DA's office in Philly and trying to get that moved as quickly as possible. And as I said at the outset, I don't think the lawyers and the Greenbergs would have settled if they didn't think there was a very good chance that that was going to happen. It was going to happen in a reasonable period of time. So those are my kinds of thoughts. The other thing that's been, in my head from the beginning, before we went on, I told Joel I was going to be thinking about poetry tonight, and that must have moved in my little brain because I kept thinking of Sir Walter Scott, oh, the tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. And what's happening now is an untangling. And I would like to end, Tom, by really saying what I think the people in the chat have said, what Joel has said, what anybody who looks at this case for 2 minutes would say, that the Greenbergs and Ellen are extraordinarily fortunate that you saw this case and got involved in this case because you have the expertise and the passion and the tenacity to go forward and to stick with it for all these years. And it's a remarkable, thing that you're doing. And every time we see somebody screw up, whether it's a police officer, or, prosecutor, or somebody out there that's not doing their job right, I think all we have to do is remember, Tom, that there are also people like you, and I firmly believe there are many more of you out there than the ones that cause us. In Italian, we would say agita. But so those are my thoughts.
Yeah. By the way, again, I'm just going to reiterate, there's only so much I can do behind a microphone, although I always say a microphone is the most powerful weapon someone can, wield. But, we mentioned Joe Rogan because he's the big, the big one, right? So it's up to you guys. And I would love to see STS Nation kind of rally together, whether it's Joe Rogan, whether it's, a Megyn Kelly, who might be very interested as a woman with a enormous platform. I'm just thinking of people, whoever you can think of. We don't, Nancy Grace, she has a book coming out about this, but honestly, these others that I'm mentioning have much, much bigger platforms now. It's a different world. So whoever
Joe,
you
if
think
I can
of,
interject and say one more thing, I'm sorry, I should have said it. And
Sure.
that is, in all of this, the one thing that the lawyer or the law professor in me wants to urge is to stay really close to what people are saying and not to get over the skis. Because the moment you assert more or read something, maybe what the person might have meant, but less than completely closely and precisely, the more you open up for people to go after where you didn't get it quite right in the responses compared to the heart of the case. So whatever it is, that anybody does, the closer that everybody stays to exactly what was said, and sticks to that, because there's certainly enough to refute by doing that. I think the more powerful the case will be, and the less subject to anybody be able to take pot shots.
Yeah.
Thank
By the
you
way,
very much, Doctor. That's the truth. Facts are facts.
If anyone has info on how to get in the White House, how to reach Joe Rogan, how to whatever it is, email me, survivingthesurvivor@gmail. You heard Tom also saying he's trying to get into the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office. Someone's asking if Vinnie Politan has covered it. He has. Coincidentally, Nancy Grace and I, just by a fluke, have the same publisher who I was talking to, and I'm going to make sure we get Nancy on this show to discuss her upcoming book about this case. And the noise is not going to be dampened anytime soon. And I would say to Governor Josh Shapiro, by the way, Tom, does Governor Shapiro right now have the power as governor to order a full investigation by the Pennsylvania State Police or direct the Attorney General to do that?
He has the right to ask the Pennsylvania State Police to take a look at the case. Okay.
Yeah.
He appoints the commissioner of the Pennsylvania State Police.
So, Governor Shapiro, you have time to do the right thing. You haven't done it for all these years, so I'm not holding my breath, but there is still time before your political career implodes. I'm going to get a call from my mother saying, "What are you talking about? You're going to end up dead." She always tells me I'm going to end up dead. Come at me, man. Come at me. Tom Brennan, you get the last word. In my eyes, first of all, you were a law enforcement officer for all those years, protecting us. Number two, I had no idea you were a profiler, so that lends a whole other angle. But in my eyes, you are a hero for stepping in and proof that there are still good people in this world willing to help people to try to turn around injustices. Tom, your final thoughts tonight.
Well, like I said, and I told Sandy and Josh, I said, when we got so far, I said, we have to get word out to the general public regarding this case. And you folks in the media did that. And I told Josh and Sandy, I said, the media is stronger than a bullet. I said, if we can get the media interest in it, I said, we're gold. And I can't thank you folks enough. Okay? If it wasn't for you guys keeping this case alive, we would have been lost. We would have been lost. And thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Tom, thank you, man. I'm literally on the verge of tears here. Josh and Sandy Greenberg need to get justice. They're going to get it with Tom Brennan. We're going to get Guy DeAndrea, the homicide prosecutor, back here. And we're going to, all of us collectively are going to make enough noise that change will have to come in some form. And ultimately, I won't be okay unless criminal charges are brought here. So we'll see how it all plays out. But we're staying on this. We're not going anywhere. I know Gavin Fish isn't going anywhere. I know Stephanie Farr from the Inquirer, who did the original story, is not going anywhere. We're at John Lucy. Shout out to him at Penn Live and many others who are working on this. So we will see you tomorrow. Donna Adelson, 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon, and then shows the rest of the week. Follow me on Twitter at Podcast STS, Instagram, Surviving the Survivor. Please like, subscribe, and consider joining our Patreon page. Love you, America. Love you, Jersey, wherever Joe Patuto is. The great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, maybe minus their governor. And by the way, congrats to the Philadelphia Eagles on pure destruction in the Super Bowl last night. Happy for the city of Philadelphia. Well deserved.
That was a heck of a win.
Yeah, I just hope that the politicians become winners too. But it seems like they've got a long way to go. Tom and Joe, please hang on for 1 second.
Sure.